Hello, Chris.
Hello, Karsten.
How are you, Chris?
I'm pretty awesome. I'm feeling
That
great.
is
I'm on vacation.
amazing, Chris. Do you know that today is already the fifth
Well,
or sixth edition of our awesome little pod, web, and whatever cast?
that's awesome. Number 6.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me check that. Let me check that because I feel like last week we made a mistake because I was last week announcing the fourth edition, and I'm pretty sure that today is actually the sixth one. Oh yes, it is.
Number 6.
It
You know,
is.
in German,
So,
to start with a bad joke, in German we say, es ist Episode Nummer 6 und 6 ist immer gut. We're not going to translate that, right?
welcome to open.clouds.dev 6.
Hello.
And no Chris is visible at the moment.
The Cloud Report, sponsoring the Open Clouds Dev.
Oh, damn it. I'm not fast enough. Let me switch over to PowerPoint because now you can sing.
Oh, again, the Cloud Report, sponsoring openclouds.dev.
But there was a problem.
Or what?
You haven't been visible. Again, try it again. Third time.
Oh, the Cloud Report, sponsoring the openclouds.dev. Yay!
Do you know whom we are missing today?
Friederike.
Yes, sir. We miss her again. And do you know why?
No.
She took the right to be on vacation.
Oh, people on vacation are the
I
worst.
hate people being on vacation.
Yeah,
Damn
awful.
it. That's a really, really bad thing. I'm so happy that you are not on vacation.
Well, kind of.
Are you on
I'm on
vacation?
vacation, but I'm still very passionate about speaking about important topics like privacy and computers and clouds and awesome stuff.
I have two more fingers. Security? Awesome. So, but Chris, what I'm a little bit interested in is what are you looking like?
I'm trying to illustrate a very, very common flaw with security and privacy. Because you know what I'm doing actually here is I'm running an incognito tab with my face. So actually nobody
Awesome.
can recognize me. But the problem is, probably due to all my tattoos and my voice, everybody knows who I am.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is no chance that anyone could be aware of who you are. Perhaps today, perhaps we should use some alias for you.
Okay.
How shall I call you today?
Um, call me Linus.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hi, Linus. How are you?
Hi. Hello, everybody. I like
It's
demos.
nice to have you. It's nice to have you on the show for the first time, and obviously for the last time as well.
Oh, yeah. You know what? It's getting really hot, so I'll kind of, take off the mask and stuff. And, ooh, here we go.
I know that guy.
Now we can start, right?
Who are you?
Hello, my name is Christopher Branston. I'm a happy, fun, and open guy. I'm single, by the way, so if there's any ladies viewing,
Wait,
you
wait, wait, wait,
know.
wait, wait, wait. Now you can continue.
Oh,
I made you crispy.
I enjoy good kernels, long walks at the beach. I'm a dog person, and my favorite ice cream flavor is banana. Linux. Oh my God, Linux. News from the Linux world.
Loose from the Linux world. And I feel like we should start this one. That is something. Oh, damn it! I need vacation as well. That is something from the Fedora wiki, and you know what they discuss currently?
Well, they're discussing to start using BTRFS as common, easy to use, and persistent storage, which is a great idea because the rest of the world is already doing it.
What is so awesome about BTRFS, as we professionals call it?
BTRFS, basically, basically, as I already mentioned, just from my very naive view, it's the ease of use and the persistency. It's just the way it's made, and actually, oh man, how do I put this in layman's terms? It's
So
good because it works.
just imagine you talk to somebody like me, being 43 years of age and having no understanding of technology. So how would you explain why I should use ButterFS over like RiserFS, even if
Well,
I won't know
there's
what
kind of,
RiserFS is?
there's the problem within, because the thing is, as somebody who doesn't want to care about computer and technology and programming stuff, you shouldn't care about what file system is being used in your operating system. Because it should just work. And
But
if you've ever noticed, especially with like little mobile devices, mobile phones, stuff like that, what does tend to happen, and I don't want to pinpoint this as a Linux problem per se, but there might be inconsistency with your data if you have large amounts of data, if you deinstall a lot of apps, if you start pushing stuff to and from your devices, and data, for example, gets lost. That's always a problem generally with the persistency of the file system. And what ButterFS does very well is this allocation, and you'll find everything where you left it the last time you used your PC. So that's the easiest way I could put it.
but in which sense is it better than say XFS 3 or 4 or 17 or 950?
It's universal, it's open. But I really couldn't tell you, because I'm not that much of a storage expert that I could actually tell you what makes the one or the other good, better, best.
But we should perhaps start by saying all of them are good.
I'm a fat 32 guy.
Then perhaps let's talk about something more substantial to the both of us, shall we?
Yes, please.
And I feel like you will like it.
Ooh.
openSUSE Leap has released version 15.2 with, and I quote, new AI and ML tools, end of quote, bullshit bingo. No, but a new version of openSUSE Leap has been distributed.
Yes.
And looking at basically, I mean, again, our small little conversation is always a very, private one. Nobody is listening
Mm.
to us. It's just the two of us. It's
Yes.
just basically two persons privately having some discussions, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
so we can be very open on what we do. Um, but having said that, your employee is
Hmm.
closely related to the openSUSE guys. So perhaps you have some opinion on that. Is it something
I
I
definitely.
should use as a private person? Is it something I should basically look into, I don't know, as part of my development process, what is good about openSUSE Leap 15.2?
Yeah, like so openSUSE itself is an open source project, and so a lot of the press releases you'll find, a lot of the people you talk to, they'll have very, very techy conversations saying like, we do support containers now, we do the AI thing, blah 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 blah.
In
But
regards to
let's put
containers,
all
they
that
support
aside.
Prio now, right?
Yeah, let's put all that aside, because the actual essence of at least what my opinion towards Leap 15.2 is, it's great. It's easy to use. Put it on a USB stick, stick the USB stick into your computer, tell it to boot from there, wait 20 minutes, and you have a brand new Linux operating system on there. You can go into the internet, you can look at videos, you can stream stuff, you can do your emails, you can do actually basically anything you want to do with your laptop, with your PC, whatever it is, and that for free. And it's easy. And I started using openSUSE a couple of years ago, and there you really needed to have a lot of knowledge about Linux, about using the terminal, maybe even being able to understand Bash. And with that, you could run Linux as an operating system on your PC. But what's changed over the last years, and where I really think that's one of the main things about the new release of Leap 15.2, it's fair, it's open, it's accessible, everybody can use it. You need very, very minimal knowledge of how a PC works, basically how to mount an image to a USB stick, stick that into your laptop and tell it to boot from it. But that's something Google will tell you if you don't know anyway, but it's just really, really easy to use. Now, putting the ease of use and its operating system for everyone to the side, for example, it does, in the meantime, have preloaded kind of standard packages that come with openSUSE that, for example, enable it to be an operating system for a server with anything you need onto that. And what they mentioned with this release and in the press release, for example, capabilities for container use and for artificial intelligence and machine learning, which at that point is stuff like Rook, or at that point is stuff like TensorFlow. And that for me is a highlight. Do you know what TensorFlow is?
Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yes, please.
What is Rook? What is TensorFlow? What is AI? What is machine learning? And why should I even care about that?
Oh wow. Oh wow, that was kind of asking me for the last 7 years.
You wanted to step away from technology a little bit. That was what you told me when you started your plaidoyer for openSUSE Leap 15.2, and you moved into the technology kind of thing. So
yes,
please pardon me, as a technology amateur, which I am.
yes.
What is Rook? What is TensorFlow? What is AI? What is ML? And why should I even care about that?
So maybe to answer all of those questions for a cloud kind of person like you are, no, you shouldn't care about it. Because if you don't want to care about it, just book an instance at Amazon, Google, Azure. It doesn't matter. But then you don't have to care about this stuff. But one thing to answer this question. You do use Facebook. We do use the tools that we're using at the moment to stream stuff. And AI/ML is the magic of algorithms, but not stupid algorithms that just do what they're coded to do, but actually algorithms that can take collected data, interpret this data, and actually grow from decision to decision because they're actually doing some learning. The other side is, for example, with containers are little stateless vehicles to transport fun stuff like, for example, apps that you might be using on your phone and the data you want to see within the app. But yeah, there's technology right out there. But what we're starting to do with stuff like Rook, with stuff like TensorFlow, is actually we're turning the IT world around. It's not so much about learn about deep code, about binaries, about bits and bytes. And once you've started crunching all those things together, you can do fun stuff like, for example, writing an algorithm, but it's actually turning it around. It's asking you the question, what would you like to do? What would you like to find out? What would you like to learn? And so basically, as mentioned with, just for me privately, it's ease of use why I love operating systems like that. It's the same with tools like that. They make stuff like artificial intelligence and machine learning usable and easy peasy. I mean, you have what? Please
It's
go
not
ahead.
about you. It's not about anything you said. It was just my family walking in this room, literally like that, trying to avoid any noise. That was just too funny to see. My apologies. And they
No
have
problem.
so much, they are so lucky that I didn't turn around the camera and showed them to the world because I could have done that.
That would show you're a human being.
Basically, it would prove that I have a girlfriend, right? And I have a family.
For the first 6 months we talked, I figured you might be some kind of artificial intelligence.
I
I
am,
thought
I
you
am,
were
I
a computer
am,
man.
I am. But take away the term intelligence. um, back to what you said. Um, and now the Google Assistant is starting to talk in the background. Damn it. Or perhaps not back to what you said, but back to what you said. Um, Leap.
Leap.
Why should I care as a private person from your perspective? Or should I care as a private person, basically being exposed to something like Windows all the time, or at best to Mac OS like I am? Why should I care? Should I care, or is it basically, yeah, nah, it's more for the geeks? What is your opinion on that?
I mean, to be
It's an
quite
honest
honest,
question. That's an
no,
honest question. That's an honest question.
no, it's not for the geeks only anymore. That's, kind of the point I was making. It's there for everybody. And it's easy enough to understand or for people to learn. But yeah, you as a private person, there I will have to put it back to, if you're a private person who's interested in operating system based on Linux for your laptop, then yeah, you should care. But otherwise, not so much, because we're living in a world where we use Google's Android and Apple's iOS.
I
And
have to say something to that. Last week, last week, you
moi,
named me an Apple fanboy.
yeah,
That's why I chose to buy a new Android phone because I'm not. Just wanted to say that.
evangelism that works.
Absolutely. And I chose the only major free Android, free isn't free, the only major Android make that is doing Android without Google. So still on privacy. All my data is happily transferred to China now. Thank you, Huawei.
That's good.
Don't know.
I mean,
Let me put it
you
that
can put
way.
it, you can put it any way you want, because it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if you're using iOS, if you're using Google Android, if you're using some form of Google free Android, if that is actually truly
Possible.
possible. But they're actually, yeah, you should care, because that's all. Breaking it down to it is always a Linux kernel. It doesnn't matter if it's free PSD, if it's something that Android made. I don't
That
know
is
how
the
true to the
interesting
kernel that
thing.
is
Really,
still, but
that is the interesting thing. Many people don't understand. They rant about Linux, and I tend to take that position just to give you a jump start on things, right? To make you come out of the corner and start explaining because you do that awesomely.
coming up
So,
by Microsoft.
oh, that's a nice one. But I feel like you should wear, that's an unintentional pun, you should wear a red hat. That would fit you very well. Just by the color.
Yeah,
Just by the color.
actually,
No pun intended.
I've not thought about it so much, but I would really enjoy wearing a red fedora, just for stylishness reasons.
Really? I feel like there are way worse things you could choose for your operating system than Fedora. Really. I truly believe that.
I also think Fedora is also a very good flavor of Linux that you can use if you
Absolutely.
do choose to use Linux as operating system.
Christopher, can you explain to me, perhaps, and we haven't spoken about that before. I mean, the whole kind of conversation we have is not scripted at all, but I don't know if you can tell it, but do you know the difference or why I would choose or should choose Fedora over, say, for example, CentOS?
Yeah, at that point, you should choose CentOS if you're trying to work with a free open source distribution in enterprise, and you should choose Fedora if you're trying to use Linux on your laptop to do everyday laptopy end user things.
So it's more consumer oriented.
Yeah, basically.
And isn't that true for openSUSE as well?
Yeah, I mean, with openSUSE we have Leap, which is kind of operating system for your laptop, and we for any kind of end user, and then we have the openSUSE flavor from developers for developers, which is openSUSE Tumbleweed, which is a rolling distribution, which brings kind of the benefit of always having the newest versions, the newest packages, basically newest versions of everything that always gets pushed to your machine if you want to.
I have one problem with openSUSE Leap as well as Tumbleweed. Yeah, no, I'm honest to you. As an end user, I would be forced to do a lot of things on my own to install all the required applications I need. The app situation, unfortunately, is not that good. Although many people don't know or forgot or haven't even heard about that SUSE and its openSUSE counterparts, as well as the other company with the red hats, as well as their community distributions, are basically amongst the oldest ones on the market, right? Not in regards to sheer age of a concrete distribution, but in regards to history. So they were basically the ones, in the very beginning, and then later on came something like Ubuntu and took over pretty much the market in that regard, and then Mint and what the distributions are called. But the problem for the SUSE, for the green distributions as well as the red ones, is basically the app situation. You have a real app gap. You get everything for your Ubuntu-based distribution or Debian-based distribution on that matter, as deb packages and or as snap packages, as containers, basically. And on the SUSE side of things, you still have to compile things in worst case, or look for things, scroll through endless lists of how would you do that, kind of forum postings. And that is really, really annoying. Is that why? Don't know if that makes sense. And again, you can choose on your side whether I'm as stupid as I might appear to be, or whether I just appear to be stupid. But is that perhaps one of the reasons why support for example, for Creo is included to solve a little bit that app gap, to shrink it down a little bit?
I mean, that's a very, very basic kind of philosophical questions about using Linux and about using open source. At that point, it really comes down to your idealism. How do I stand towards the use of IT? How do I stand towards the devices I'm using? With that comes the operating systems, the apps that I'm using. And maybe to take a better real life example. At the moment, if I go to town, in a lot of the coffee shops that you have, if I want to grab a coffee, they'll give me a coffee to go mug with a plastic lid and probably some kind of print on the cup. And it's just not very environmentally friendly, but it's there, it's just there. I can buy it, I get it. And I have a coffee, problem solved. I wanted a coffee, I'm drinking a coffee. If you want to go the sustainable route, you'll have to actually look for a shop that either do like recycle cups, where you pay a deposit and you can bring them back, or where they have biodegradable cups, or at least cups that are made a little more sustainable. And the coffee is going to be probably 50 cents to €1 more expensive, but you're doing something good for the world because you're using, at that point, sustainable technology, if you want to call that sustainable cup technology. But it's going to give you a very, very good feeling, because if your idealism tells you, I like coffee, but I don't like destroying the climate, then yeah, you'll have to put in a little extra work to actually get the coffee in the cup that you desire, because it gives you the good feeling of being sustainable. And it's
I
the same
certainly
with
get your
operating.
point, but please tell me what that makes out of Ubuntu. So Ubuntu
So,
is not
you know,
sustainable.
it's the same. You know, the question is, when it comes to my operating system that I use, do I just, is it important to me that it just works and I couldn't care less what the technology behind it is? Hey, then, buy an Apple device, buy an Android device. It's just there, it works. But you'll never have the chance to actually know the inner workings and know we've already talked about this a million times, big billion-dollar corporations are anything but sustainable. But if you're an idealist and saying, with my computing that I'd like to do, for example, I want to send an email, I want to stream a movie, I do care about the fairness, the sustainability, the openness of it all, then you can choose a Linux operating system. But with that comes that you will have to do some manual work, put in some manual labor, because in a community, there is no $1 million budget to make things nice and pristine and smooth. It's people doing it out of their free will. I mean, if you're a good UI UX designer, go ahead. There's a couple of really good, apparently, UI UX designers working in the Ubuntu community, because it's also nice. But even with Ubuntu, there will be certain things that you can do with the push of a button on an Apple device, where you have to put in some manual kind of workload, manual clicking and connecting little things together to get it running. But at that point, it's really, really down to your own idealism of, how do I want to use software, and how important is the whole sustainability behind my software use, for example.
You ever get back to me after we had one of those sessions and tell me you just conquered the whole topic for yourself? You were talking all the time. You do that ever, because I will definitely refer to what you just said, because you just came out of your corner. I like that. But then again, I'm sitting on an Apple device at the moment.
Yes.
I know that you are, for example, you are forced to use a Windows device from time to time.
Yes.
And although we feel like they have strong disadvantages in regard to sustainability, perhaps to control over what you do, we are still forced to some extent to use it, either by our companies, or perhaps by the sheer fact that we do not want to tinker around with our systems. We just want them to work in that regard. So what makes that for Windows, pardon me, for Linux on a desktop? Because frankly, I feel like 99% of all the people do not want to look into manuals to install a software. They do not want to I don't know, query some forums to understand how to make some kind of driver work or some sort of hardware work later on. Isn't that to some extent the death of Linux on the desktop? And speaking of that, why would it anyhow make sense then to develop something like Leap or Fedora, or be it Ubuntu in that regard, if it's just for freaks and not for the masses? Or doesn't it matter at all? Because it's the 1% that matters. What is your take on that?
We'll take
you see, I'm getting a little bit philosophical at the moment.
We can take another real life example. So, for example, in order to be able to drive a car in Germany and anywhere else on the planet, you need a driver's license, because the state says, I'm not going to let you participate in something where there's a lot of people around and where there's interaction going on without you having understood the basics of, for example, how driving works. Yeah. And if you're not willing to take the driver's test, then don't drive a car, call an Uber. And basically, it's the same situation.
Which is not allowed in Berlin, but that's a different story.
Okay, or call a taxi. And basically, it's the same with this whole operating system stuff. Actually, if you want to be called an operator operating an operating system, maybe you should take the time to understand the basics of what you're doing there. And if not, buy an Apple device. It's kind of the Uber of devices.
Give me a second. Just go ahead. Give me a second. Please go ahead.
Ooh, yeah. And all I'm saying is it's not for nerds. It's not for freaks. But yeah, Linux is going to, in some form, be a technical topic. And maybe, hey, Linux could be your entry into learning IT. Crypto. What's it called? Crypto. The bottom part is
Cryptonomicon by Neal Stephenson.
That sounds like a Pokemon.
That sounds, first of all, like a book that you should read. You should read that book. That's the English version. I also have the German version.
Oh, no habla inglés. No habla inglés, mi amigo.
There is a Spanish version available as well. And they have an operating system in here called Finux.
Finux? And, with an F?
With an F in the beginning, for whatever reason, I don't know. And part of what we just discussed, and I meant that really pretty much like figuratively, we are getting into philosophical kind of territory at the moment, because when you explained the concept of a driver's license, and thank you for that. No, but when you explained that, you basically said to some extent that you didn't say that specifically, but I first of all, I second your opinion. If you want to understand how your computer works, take something like a driver's license, get a little bit low level, because you can later on always get more towards the high level without any issues. But what I'm pretty much referring to is there is a discussion in here in that book. That's why I just took it out. And that's a discussion between Randy, which is one of the main persons there, his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend, and some philosophical kind of professors, and they basically they have more like that stance of a person not having taken some sort of driving license course, and they are discussing the internet. That is basically in the beginning of the 90s, around 92, 93, or perhaps 96, something around that. So the internet was already some sort of a real thing, and they discussed it. They used the metaphor of data highway. And Randy, the tech nerd, basically he understood himself to be a hobbit in that regard, and he basically just told them to shut up because the metaphor is simply not working, because they have no understanding of what is going on. And that starts a very interesting kind of conversation of who is basically saying that a metaphor does not make sense, and with which reason, and why, and so on and so forth. And basically what you said reminded me on that, because just the two of us, because it's just the two of us. Now nobody is listening, nobody's watching us, it's just the two of us, always. Because we value privacy, but that's a different story. The two of us, we are basically Randys in that regard. We are basically the ones knowing it, having learned about it, who got deep into it, who understood it, and who are basically telling all the world outside that their bubble is not going to work and that their a kind of metaphor is basically an invalid one. Um, but on the other end, there is that crowd, basically the 99% outside, which is just looking at us or at Randy, for example, with huge eyes, and they basically feel like being left behind because we are too technical, we are too advanced, we have too much understanding of things they never will understand, and they simply don't accept the concept of some sort of an internet driving license, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and that's basically we are basically just shaping on, or we are basically not shaping. We are basically touching those areas of philosophy where we as nerds are basically perhaps even too far ahead. And you say like openSUSE Leap 15.2, and you do not call it openSUSE, you just call it Leap 15.2 because you are way more a nerd than I am. And you use the term BTRFS
My
instead
glasses
of.
are thicker than your glasses, man. No, don't cry.
I couldn't care less because I have the Nike logo. Does it focus? It does. And you don't. Ah, eat this.
True that. True that.
And don't forget, it's not about how big something is, it is about the technology,
Yes.
the technique that you are applying. Can we get a
Yeah.
little bit out of that corner of things? Um, no, but the point that I just tried to make is, and I'm really thinking of that quite honestly because it's not just the operating system. It's more like everything around us. We understand ourselves as open source advocates.
Yes.
Um, we understand ourselves as people who are willing to go the extra mile for open source, who are willing to contribute back. And I, for example, had a conversation with an really unnamed person from a company that basically open sourced some products. And my impression there was basically that they did not understand the real value of open source because they basically ended up saying like, yeah, when I asked them, why did you open source your product, your amazing product, your awesome product?
Yeah.
Basically, the outcome was, yeah, we did that because it is then later on able to run on a multitude of systems. And I was like, what? So basically, that understanding of a community, which is doing the work for me, but that's not about open source, right? That's basically about abusing a community from my
Yes.
perspective. Um,
Yeah.
but we as advocates for open source, we feel like we have to contribute back. We feel like we need to go the extra mile, and still, even us, we are not using those products day in day out. I'm using macOS because
Mhm.
it's more comfortable. It's perhaps it's running the one or two kind of programs I want to run because they are not available on the Linux side of things, such as Lightroom or Photoshop. Although you have GIMP, but I would wish the GIMP project would acquire some sort of a user interface designer. Um, the point that I'm trying to make is it perhaps that our stance of open source is too far off for the masses? Are we too far away from them to reach them? Because when I reach out to my family and say, why don't you use Linux on your desktop, for example? I would install it to you. You can use a browser. You anyhow do all the time just browsing. So where's the
Yeah.
problem? You could use a secure browser. You could use it will be updated automatically. It's there's way less surface for attacks because it's never ever going to run with elevated privileges and so on and so forth. The reaction was all the time like, yeah, no, I stick with Windows because Windows. Um,
I
what do
mean,
we make out of
the
that?
other part of open source in the community is, and I talk about this a lot, is being open, and part of being open is being inclusive. And part of being inclusive is creating equality. And part of creating equality should be to say, like, not everybody in my community can be a subject matter expert. And by doing my work or doing what maybe I can do best, because in a community there'll be a lot of different jobs, um, I can enable something for somebody else. And as an idealist, I'd say everybody who uses something I've created with a community also gives back to the community, but that's just not how the world works. And that's just a part of the kind of big ethical and moral acceptance you need to have. On Google, when you use Google Maps, there's probably only about 2% of the worldwide users who write reviews, who do edits, who upload photos, and everybody uses it, but only a very, very small percentile is actually people who contribute. And that's okay.
Yeah,
Because the
but
beauty
perhaps the problem is not the contribution. Problem still is acceptance from my perspective, the willingness to go the extra mile, and the willingness to get out of your golden cage. And I miss that a lot, not with SUSE, not with
I mean, like,
Fedora, but with the general
yeah,
audience.
I mean, for me, what I get out of working open and working with open source is, and actually everybody who's working creative or who is generally creating something, the more people use it, the more you see that what you're doing actually makes sense, and that what you're doing is needed, and that it's accepted. And that's a very, very
Is it
good feeling.
accepted?
I mean, think about, you have children, man. You do a lot of stuff for your children, and you're not really getting so much back. They don't pay you, they don't give you a promotion or anything, but what you get back is love. And is your kid saying, like, our dad is the best dad out there? And
I,
that's exactly the same thing.
I'm
You're
on your
not.
side. I'm on your side in that regard. But and there's always a but, and I will make you visible because I hate it if you are not visible. No, not that way. I want to make you visible in a small way. No, no. There we go. So, nice hat, by the way. Again, should be red. Anyways, the point is not being about being point to all the ones just listening to our podcast. Christopher is trying to sabotage me in wearing different hats all the time and in wearing them in different styles. So you could make up your own mind about why he's doing that.
I'm a
Anyways,
weird kid.
what I just wanted to think of, and what the point I'm just trying to make is basically um, not about the love we get or might get or the appreciation we might get or not even about getting something back at all. But if it's not accepted from the outside world, isn't that a bad and sad thing? And you said just as a joke, aha, if you don't care, why don't you just go and set up something on the Google Cloud or Amazon or Azure and just do it there because you do not need to care there. Um, the huge problem with that is basically, and it is something that basically drives me mad for quite a while already. Um, isn't it that we are basically creating some sort of community of idiots that is just able to, press a button use some sort of a front end and set up things, but without understanding that, and without understanding the limitations, the problems, the security issues, and the likes. Isn't that basically one of the real problems that we are facing, and which is ultimately, if you just transfer that kind of thinking from the hyperscalers down towards your desktop environment, which is basically affecting, like, again, 99% of all the people using a computer. It should just work. Please bring me into my golden cage. Decide everything for me because you know better than me. Isn't that, a real threat and a real issue from your perspective?
I really don't think so, because it's really coming from the root and the core of open source. Experts, or not even always experts, just people doing a thing that they like and that gives them a cause, that gives them a reason to do it.
That's true. That's true for open source. I'm totally on your side with open source. I'm speaking about the other part of the world. Those small 99% of the world that do not care about open source, that do not care about going the extra mile, that do not care about understanding things.
Yeah, and I mean, that for me is the very, very base, because if I'm saying I am open, I'm community, I'm all these things, and then walk around telling the world everybody who doesn't believe in the same stuff I do is an idiot, I'd actually be doing the anti-open thing. So for me, it's okay, and it's okay that a very, very large part is more on the user side, and a very, very small part is on the actual technical expert side.
But wouldn't it be a necessity in that regard that we basically try to reach the user side more, just to ensure that we don't create that generation of digital idiots that I see on the horizon already, that are basically just able to use their smartphones in regard to click a button, nice thing there.
Well, yeah, we should, but that's so much more general than software, than open source, than using technology, because with a lot of things, and that's what's kind of changed in the world through connectivity, through mobility, through people just generally having more opportunity as they did 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 and 100 years ago. Technology is a bit part of that. But generally, it will always be up to yourself to inform yourself about what you're about to do, stuff you're going to use, the food you put inside yourself, a book you're going to read. You can inform yourself, or you can't. But the one thing is, if you decide to go down the naive route and say, I don't care about the stuff I'm using and how it's made up and what the background is, then don't complain when stuff goes wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm totally on your side. I was just recommending a book.
I mean, yeah. For me,
I'm too negative
the interesting fact.
To sum that up, I'm a little bit too negative on the good things openSUSE brings onto the market, not because of the technical excellence in there, but because I am afraid that it's basically just a drop in the ocean. Is it perhaps my fault then?
No, it's never too late to change. There's this great inspiring thing I saw on a web page, and I've seen it in different forums. I could, for the life of me, not tell you where the actual origin is, but I see it plopping up in the deeps of the internet and open source, and it's treat open source as open source treats you. And that, for me, perfectly sums up why anybody should be using, for example, in this case, stuff like Leap or not, why people should care or not, why people should contribute or not.
Do you use it?
Yeah. So I use Leap as a desktop operating system. I've used it for different stuff at work. For example, while our team was building the sandbox that we've already talked about here, I was using a Windows machine with WSL on it, using Leap 15.1, connecting via Visual Studio Code to our GitHub project, which then created the whole thing that we built. And it was awesome because I had the freedom of choice, even doing crazy, really messed up cross-platforming, but it was the best way for me to work. And I learned a load of new stuff because I had no idea how, for example, building stuff worked, how GitHub really worked, how especially GitHub in a kind of visual IDE worked for me. And it was great. I learned so much stuff, but that was primarily not because they paid me to, but because I cared. And that's what made it fun.
I mean, what many people don't know is the same as with your Android device. Oh, that's a different one, I guess. The same with your Android device. Most of the stuff that you are using within cloud environments, pretty much regardless of be it a hyperscaler or a smaller cloud vendor, is open source based, right? And even if we, to some extent, have a, let me put it that way, some sort of different stance towards hyperscalers than other people might have. Many things they run is open source based.
Because you are correctly using the alternate word for cloud. Everybody, the whole world calls it cloud, cloud, cloud. Everything's in the cloud. Let's put it into the cloud. Clouds are cool. But the cloud is actually a hyperscaler. And with that word comes the actual use of why kind of clouds and cloud-based systems were originally invented, because it was a problem of scaling. It was a problem of scaling out. It was a problem of scaling up. It was a problem of the cost behind it. It was a problem of, hey, so we made the internet available for millions and billions of people, and now we actually need to hold a resource so everybody can, use, consume, spend money, whatever it is, different companies, different crap going on in the internet. But the actual reason for it was a hyperscaler, until media came along and said, we'll call it the cloud, and we'll say the cloud is awful because everybody's putting it in there and people are making money from that. And that's unfair because we're not the ones making money. And then came others saying, like, only with cloud can we save the world, like evangelists like me. Cloud is important. Cloud is going to make the world great, And it was just like this whole topic was smashed, was overused, was buzzworded by the world, but actually breaking it down there, yeah, we had a need to create massive resource, and that's why we have hyperscalers today.
That is true.
But letting them get off this week, huh?
That is definitely true, but it does not make them per se something good, because what I see then again, it turns out in this show, I'm going to be more like the warner, the one warning about things, and you are the one that is the enthusiast. Perhaps we should call it the enthusiast and the beast. No, but my stance towards and on hyperscalers is a very, very nuanced one, and perhaps different than many others, because what I see is basically, or let me start again a little bit with what I said a little bit up front. I fear that we are creating generations of digital idiots at the moment.
Yes.
And a huge part of that is basically the tendency to put everything onto hyperscalers cloud environments. Problem with that is basically, you should understand it properly. You understand it properly, but to all the others listening or watching us, what is a hyperscaler ultimately? It is just a huge outsourcing company for your infrastructure. You source it out because
connected.
Absolutely, it's other people's service. That's basically the definition of cloud. You basically outsource everything from your own data center or from even your own server room. where you basically have control over it end to end, into an environment where you have, a way more restricted way of controlling things, because you are just allowed to do the things that the owner of the environment allows you to. Um, and that is basically you outsource your whole infrastructure into a huge data center. Um, Again, that's a data center and that's infrastructure that other people own. You have to play by their rules. And what that basically ends up doing is you do not just outsource your knowledge, pardon me, you do not just outsource your infrastructure. I ruined basically what I wanted to say. You outsource your knowledge as well, because they give you easy to use tools, or the tools that look like being easy to use, those awesome kind of dashboards and so on and so forth, where you just click around and basically set up your ecosystem without actually knowing what is going on. Because all the complexities are then taken away from you, which then again leads me to the direction of what we had with Linux a little bit upfront. And you just basically use their ecosystem, their tools to outsource your IT. So far, so good. But again, the problem is you do outsource your knowledge. You do outsource your understanding of the complexities. You do outsource your understanding of how those layers interact with each other. You end up being some sort of a digital idiot. I cannot paraphrase it differently. If you do not work against it, if you do not intend to go the extra mile, if you do not, and then basically that's where the circle closes. If you do not look and understand into what is going on, and one of the worst, no, wrong, forget about worst. One of the biggest hyperscalers is Microsoft with Azure. And then if you work with, for example, Windows, which is quite obvious, you end up being in a Microsoft-controlled kind of ecosystem. And you sit there as a digital monkey that you end up being, and say, yeah, awesome, I have something on Azure. I don't know how it works, but it's serverless. Awesome. And the problem is that you end up being trapped into an ecosystem. You end up being trapped with one provider, one vendor, that is basically able to control you end to end. And that's what they do. That's what they try to do. They bring more and more features into their Azure cloud. I had a conversation with a friend of mine who is running, some small consultancy. And he was basically asked by a customer of his to provide him with a quote of an Exchange server, and it ended up for the customer being like, I don't know, 20k euro in licenses. Pretty much so much that the distributor then basically told them, you know what, just add up 1 or 2 grand on top of it, and we'll provide you with all the hardware. And on the Microsoft cloud, basically you get that thrown away at you for some $100 per month, even if you have your whole organization converted there. So what they do is they suck you into their ecosystem. They try to keep you in there, and they try to make you digital idiots and digital monkeys.
Coming from, corporate responsibility that we were talking about, and maybe breaking it down, not from the handful of billion-dollar companies kind of regulating the market, but coming from the many tons of...
But that is again a problem. A handful of billion-dollar companies regulating the market. That kind of regulating the market, because that's what they do. They basically end up sharing the market between themselves. There's no real competition anymore.
But the thing is, if I'm a small, medium-sized enterprise,
I should look into Linux. I should look into how things work. I should set up my own kind of stack. I can run on their ecosystem if I want to.
I'm going to put this out there very as neutrally as I can. But if I'm a small and medium-sized company and I deal with customers and I deal with customer data, and some of it really maybe being very, very private data that shouldn't be leaked. I'm figuring, the maximum budget I'll be able to spend on my IT guy if I have my own guy and I had to buy all the licenses and subscription servers is I might be able to spend 60, 80, maybe 100K if I'm doing well on buying an IT professional. A company like Microsoft, if they want, they'll be able to spend like 1.5 million on the best IT guy on the planet because since they're such a large ass corporation, yeah, they have to take security and they have to take functionality really, really serious. And shouldn't it be my responsibility as some person doing business to always choose the best and always choose the most secure option to kind of defend the rights and the privacy or whatever it is of my customers? Because another real life example coming here, if I cut myself into my hand, I can look at my hand and say like, oh, okay, I only bruised myself a little bit. I'll put a bandage on it and it's okay. But if I can see the bone through my hand because I cut so far down, I can,
Okay.
Dr.
No
Google,
lunch today.
I can go on Google and find videos and information on how to stitch my own hand, but I won't do that. I'll go to a hospital and I'll go to a very highly paid professional and say, look, I fucked this up. And although in the meantime, healthcare is a private multi-billion-dollar business, or it is part of the state, I'll say, like, look at this, I fucked up, please help me, because you're the guy who can help me. I'm not even qualified to do so. And isn't that my responsibility, for example, in this case, for my health, to say, I'll choose the best option, even if I sometimes don't like it, because I have to go out and I'm bleeding and, the hospital is far away. But isn't it my responsibility to say I choose the best option to keep my system running, to fulfill my goals?
But if the cure they
whatever?
are giving you is basically making you their slave ultimately,
Yeah.
and if what they prescribe you is basically killing your brain over time, that won't be the better solution, right? So the point that I'm trying to make, and totally get your point, the point that I'm trying to make is I should have enough knowledge and I should create the knowledge of how to treat some wounds at least before I get injured. Obviously, there will be cases and use cases and scenarios where I need to go to the hospital. Absolutely on your side. And there would be cases and scenarios where I would need to call the emergency ambulance. But frankly, to me, it's pretty much the same with medicine. I see people around me taking all kind of medicines,
You're tired?
oh, I have
Pop
a
a pill.
headache, I
You're
take a pill.
hyperactive? Pop a pill. Your head
Exactly,
hurts? Pop a pill.
exactly. And now you take a pill for all the side effects to go away. So the problem is you could do that. On the other hand, it would perhaps be very advisable to have enough knowledge on your own, to build up that kind of knowledge, to learn that knowledge, that you can at least do 99% or judge about 99% of those things going on. There will always be edge cases.
So just to have said it, there is one option which is free, which is open, and which is sustainable.
But
You
it
can pee
requires you
onto
to
your
look into
hand
that.
where you have the wound, but it's yucky. And that's kind of how the world is. Sometimes the open and the free and the sustainable solution might be a little harder to use than the commercial offer, but coming it
But
all
the point is, but basically the point is, you should not start looking into those things and perhaps making a decision when it is basically, when your roof is already burning. You should do that upfront. It's very valid to understand yourself as consuming. Shut up. It's not you. It's in that regard. It's just Alexa. Um, it's always wait. Alexa, stop. Thank you.
Alexa,
No,
suche
she's not able
Bilder
to hear
von
you.
Brüste.
No, what I wanted to say is basically, your responsibility. And it's basically why you would choose open source, why you would look into those things. Your responsibility as a company working with open source, as a company providing things to your customers, right, is not just to go, the cheap route. Your responsibility, and it is your responsibility, is to look into the ecosystem, understand the ecosystem, make a decision based on facts, on things you learned, and not based on advertisement around you, and not based on zeitgeist. And understand why you are choosing things. Because I do not, don't get me wrong, I do not say don't go into Azure. It's an awesome environment. There's a lot of thought put into that. But what I say is, go in there, set up your own stack, because that is what Christopher told you up front when he said, yeah, you could just leverage your virtual machine there with some Linux, because there's no risk on that. Just set up your own stack, understand it, and then run it on that ecosystem. But don't make yourself a slave of that ecosystem, right?
Yes.
But again, 99% of people will tell you, it's so much work. I need to learn so many things. I was learning in school and in university and in college. I do not want to learn ever again. They have nice, nifty little pictures, and their architectural diagrams are looking great, so I can put them into PowerPoint and make my presentation. And that's why I choose Azure.
I mean, that's kind of, yeah, it's sad. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, my head hurts when I need to think. The one thing I do want to put in there also is, just coming from, why should we be learning? Why should I give a crap about what I know or what I don't know? And there's one cool thing that a guy called Oren Harari said, and it's about innovation, and it's about how stuff and how ideas get to be the revolutions they sometimes are. And Oren Harari said, the invention of the light bulb did not come from continuous improvement of the candle. And he couldn't have been more correct.
That is a nice thing.
And, I come from a very German, and with that very conformist household, where I was told basically, because somebody's older than you, because somebody's been here longer than you, he knows everything better. But that kind of was the kickoff for me and my pioneering spirit, saying like, no, it was what you know better might have been fitting for the time that you grew up in and for the situations you faced. But I'm a whole different generation. I'm a whole different kind of person, and I cannot rely and I cannot feed myself on everything that's just been pushed into my brain because it's always been so, but actually going out there and challenging the standard and saying like, I want to do something different. I want to create my world with my view, with my opinion that gives me a sense of living. And that's so beautiful, because that ties into everything we've said within the last, I don't know how long we've been online again.
And with what we said last time. Then again, with privacy and security and so on and so forth. We've been online for 1 hour and 10 minutes so far. No, I'm wrong. 1 hour and 8 minutes and 30 seconds. And now it's 33 seconds.
Let's do this for the next half an hour.
And now it is 1 hour, 8 minutes and 43 seconds.
But what I would really like to say here, because I've just realized this while kind of we were playing this, one guy, this back and forth game, one good guy, one bad guy, whatever it is. But what I would find wildly important, more than creating more rules and creating a right and wrong, and trying to at this point we're on social media influencing people, is actually to tell the people, take back your own right to be a sovereign person. Take back your own right to make founded decisions, and take back your own right to lead a wholesome and completed life. And that's a decision you make your very self.
Really, read this book. This book, when I read it the first time, Cryptonomicon by Neal Stephenson. When I read that book the first time, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I immediately threw out an old laptop and installed Linux there again, because I was basically avoiding that kind of ecosystem for 10 years.
Yes.
I just took it out because that book, by the way, it explains a lot of encryption methods and so on. It's an awesome book for nerds and for people that want to learn about how technology is basically working. And one major kind of thing that is happening there is Randy working with Linux and Finux, pardon me, with Finux. It's basically explaining that Finux is the only operating system where you could basically use the X desktop to confuse surveillance systems. And it explains basically how you could grab pictures from other people's computers without hacking in there, just by freaking things. Fun egg freaking, for example, and how you would and why you would want to set up security on your system, and why you want to have something like privacy, and how easy or not easy that is with Finux. And it is an awesome thing. It's basically it shows you why you want to get into that open source world. Then again, that the both of us, Chris and Karsten, are that much embracing. Yes, it is a very, very, it's a steep learning curve, and it is. I don't know. There are things that might not work out well, and you might fail. You might fail desperately. Um, but nonetheless, that gives you knowledge. You learn from that. You adopt. You basically make up your own mind. You create your own world, and it makes you independent. It makes you independent of the likes of Google, Microsoft, Apple, and so on and so forth. And if you choose to choose their, if you happen to choose their ecosystem, then it is a decision that you make, and it's not something somebody else makes for you. And if you choose their ecosystems, you know about the limitations, and you have made up your own mind about why you would choose it, and which kind of which kind of poison you want to take. And why you would want to take that. Because frankly, I am not ready for working on openSUSE Leap 15.2 all the time. I simply cannot do that. Or perhaps I could do that, but I don't want to do that. But I know why I wanted to do that and when I wanted to do that. And I know that that is always around. Pretty much regardless of your Linux distribution, and regardless of whether it is BTRFS or ZFS or RiserFS or NTFS. No, not NTFS. Pretty much regardless of that, because I know about the values of open source, privacy, and I made my own deliberate decisions. And that is basically what sets me apart from the digital idiots, from those monkeys. And that's why I basically evangelize against just going into Azure and doing things
Community,
there.
give me a Carmen. Carmen!
You just screwed up the whole show.
I'm so sorry. I heard evangelist.
I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to say that. I wanted to say that all the time already. So I just waited for a moment. And nonetheless, you did it in a very sympathical way. Damn it. We always end up evangelizing. That is it for me or is it for
it's
open
so
source?
crappy, and I'm on vacation, I wanted to show the world the pure and unfiltered Chris today, because I have been holding back due to the professional background of our production here, and I have not managed because I have been doing what I do as a job. That sucks. I have a job that I do out of idealism and belief, and because it gives me a reason, it sucks that I can't chill when I'm in my free time. Can I get a comment?
No, you cannot.
Oh. I'd be a.
No.
How would you?
No.
Oh, the Cloud Report, sponsoring open.clouds.dev. And now together, the Cloud Report, sponsoring the openclouds.dev.
You won't ever get me to sing.
Maybe if we do get Friederike on a call at some point, she'll sing a duet with me.
I'm pretty sure that Friederike will be at the show, perhaps not today, because vacation, and she takes that seriously, other than you. But she will be back from vacation, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, I feel like when she's on vacation or when she's back from vacation, she should sing a song review once we see that logo.
Ooh, the Cloud Report, sponsoring openclouds.dev. See how it's triggering me? Oh my God.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I try to avoid it, but it's something like a drug. You cannot avoid it. It's and that is the way that we basically interact with each other as well.
Well,
it's like a traffic accident. You cannot look away.
What I really enjoyed today, and maybe if people do view this until the end, do give us feedback and do write comments, because we only had 2 pieces of news today, but we discussed about a whole world of things.
As we did last week, actually.
And I think that's pretty awesome and great, because you also kept asking the question, if I'm not a tech guy, if I'm not a developer, if I'm not working in the field of IT, what does this all mean to me? And I hardly ever, I'm asked very, very often, what does this mean to my budget, and how many millions am I going to make, and why should I invest in stuff that you're telling me about? But nobody ever asks me, why should I care? Why should I as a human care? And you did today very, very often. And I haven't seen this in any of the other web formats. So I think we should continue doing that. But, I want to give the people what they want. So please tell us what you want. We'll do anything but nakedness.
Oh, what a relief. What a relief. Well, you know what? Let's end it on those words. It cannot get any better.
Thank you, Internet.
We won't do nakedness.
Being part of this. I am going to go back into my vacation and use the Internet, what it was made for, streaming movies and looking at naked ladies. Bye-bye.
And I won't cut that out. I will leave it in here. And I will blackmail you with that.
Why? It's on the internet. You can't blackmail me because everybody can see it.
Then I'll blackmail it. Then I'll blackmail you with the threat of cutting it out.
Censorship, yeah. That's why you're using your Huawei phone now. Censorship is your.
I do. Learn from the best. Enjoy your week. Chris, enjoy your vacation. And thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to next week.
Next week, sir.
See you then. Bye. The Cloud Report sponsor.